Hey everyone, welcome back to Legacy Shinobi. Today's story explores, what if Naruto's training trip triggered a world-shaking prophecy? Before we dive in, make sure to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. Let's get started. The Land of Fire had such lovely weather. Fluffy clouds drifted lazily across the blue sky, and the warm sunlight gently touched the top of Naruto's head. The cheerful chirping of birds made it easy for him to see why Shikamaru enjoyed cloud watching so much. It was a perfect day for the young genin, but he couldn't fully appreciate it. Why? Well, that was simple. A certain old pervert with long, white hair. Normally, Jiraiya, the Sannin, wasn't a problem, but his constant giggling was getting on Naruto's nerves. The high-pitched noises from Jiraiya were unsettling. How could a grown man make such annoying sounds? Naruto had no idea. Ugh. Naruto groaned in frustration as he sat up cross-legged. Being with Jiraiya wasn't all bad, he actually enjoyed spending time with the perverted hermit, even if they weren't doing much. However, Naruto was expecting intense training to help him retrieve Sasuke and defend against the Akatsuki. Instead, Jiraiya was spending all his time peeping at women in a hot spring. Jiraiya's ears twitched with irritation at Naruto's loud attempts to get his attention. The noise was not only annoying but also disrupted his concentration. He was determined not to waste the chance to enjoy the view and knew his fans would never forgive him for slacking off. "Will you quiet down, brat?" Jiraiya whispered sharply, glancing back at Naruto. "Or are you trying to get us caught?" Naruto's ears perked up at Jiraiya's words. He frowned and glared. "Us? What do you mean us?" he whispered back. Even he knew it wouldn't end well if they alerted the women below them, who were only about 25 feet away. "You're here too, aren't you?" Jiraiya snapped. "If you don't stay quiet, you'll ruin my research and might get us caught. Do you want us to get jazzed off again?" With that, he turned back to his telescope, hoping the argument was over. Naruto might not be the smartest shinobi, but he understood what Jiraiya meant by research. Jiraiya had openly called himself a super pervert, so it wasn't hard to figure out what was really going on. The blonde scoffed. "If we get caught, who do you think those women will want to beat up the most? The cute innocent boy or the old perv with the telescope who dragged him here?" Unbeknownst to them, their conversation had grown louder, and the women in the hot spring were starting to look around for the source of the disturbance. Jiraiya opened his mouth to reply but quickly shut it, realizing Naruto was right. If those girls found them here, he would be the one taking the brunt of their anger. But he kept that to himself, the brat didn't need to know how right he was. With a smug grin, Jiraiya replied, "After I explain my reason for being in this compromising position, the ladies will want to help me find inspiration. It's not every day you get to assist an artist in creating his masterpiece." His face flushed, and drool dripped from his mouth as he imagined a new scene. Somehow, he believed his delusions. Naruto was dumbfounded. How could a Sannin, one of the legendary three, act this way? A man who was feared by many shinobi was nothing but a big foolish pervert. And he's my master. I'm doomed, Naruto thought, mentally sighing. "Oh, please." Naruto scoffed at Jiraiya's grandiose claims. "We both know you're just a big pervert using research as an excuse to spy on pretty girls." He pointed an accusing finger at his master. Naruto's patience was wearing thin. It had been a week since they left the village, and they still hadn't done any real training. "I left the village to get stronger to find Sasuke, not to follow him around while he acts like a pervert all day," Naruto thought bitterly. Jiraiya's smirk widened, and Naruto was sure more boasts were coming. "Without my constant inspiration, I'd never be able to continue my famous make-out series." Jiraiya shouted back defensively. "How would my loyal fans survive without my books?" A giant tick mark appeared on Naruto's forehead. "Are you serious?" they were shouting now. "I bet a 5-year-old could write better books. At least their books would have a real storyline." Naruto smirked. Jiraiya seemed oblivious to their increasing volume, but Naruto realized things were about to get very interesting. He was right. Now Jiraiya, usually so composed, was getting upset. "Well, I'm sorry your tiny brain can't grasp the complexities of my literary masterpieces." Jiraiya's pride was so intense that Naruto wondered if he should just go home and train alone. He was starting to think Jiraiya was a lost cause. A tale of lust, passion, and love all in one package. Jiraiya continued, his smirk unwavering. "It's simply perfect." Naruto, no longer paying attention, had suddenly become very aware of their location. If he knew anything, it was that he needed to leave immediately. He peered over Jiraiya's shoulder and saw something that made his face go pale. He mumbled an incoherent response and began to back away slowly. Jiraiya noticed the change in Naruto's demeanor. "Naruto, what's wrong? Are you okay?" he asked with genuine concern. "I'm fine, pervy sage," Naruto said quickly, trying to reassure his mentor. "I'm just not feeling well. I'll see you back at the hotel." With that, Naruto took off, leaving a confused Jiraiya behind. Jiraiya heard the urgency in Naruto's voice but didn't understand why. "What's going on?" he muttered to himself. Ahem. A firm but light voice cut through the air, carrying an unmistakable bloodlust. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 turned slowly and turned pale at the sight before him. A group of very angry, half-naked women stood over him, some cracking their knuckles menacingly. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 remembered where he was and what he'd been doing. He was crouched just outside the women's hot spring, telescope in hand, with a perfect view of where the girls had been relaxing. The women were very aware of his presence. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 gulped. Compromising position, indeed, he thought. And now listen, ladies, I know this looks bad, but I can explain. His attempts to justify himself fell on deaf ears. Despite being in similar situations before, he was still terrified. These women were clearly 𝐸𝐴𝐻, their chakra radiating with anger. And it was all aimed at him. If it weren't for the bloodlust, this might be kind of exciting, 𝐤𝐢𝐳 thought. Even in this dire situation, he couldn't keep his mind out of the gutter. He closed his eyes and braced for the inevitable pain. The screams of the great toad sage echoed through the town. Naruto, only about 100 feet away, chuckled to himself. It had been a while since he'd laughed like that, and knowing 𝐤𝐢𝐳 would be okay made him feel better about finding humor in his master's misfortune. For a moment, the weight on Naruto's shoulders felt lighter. He needed that. Thanks, 𝐫𝐫_Sage, he thought fondly as he made his way back to the hotel. I can't believe you managed to escape. Naruto ran his hand through his spiky hair and sighed. I was kinda hoping they'd get a few more hits in on you, he added with a sheepish grin. He enjoyed teasing his sensei almost as much as he loved eating ramen almost. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 rolled his eyes at Naruto's jab. Sorry to disappoint you, he said sarcastically, nursing a sizable bump on his head with an ice pack. He winced from the pain. Maybe next time I'll grope a few of them, and then they'll really lay into me. Although he was joking, 𝐤𝐢𝐳 blushed slightly at the thought. I doubt it, Naruto said dismissively. You seem to bounce back from serious injuries no matter how many times those women beat you up. Do pervs have some kind of secret defense jutsu? I might need to look into that. When you've been pummeled by Tsunade herself, nothing else comes close, 𝐤𝐢𝐳 said with a touch of pride. Naruto was fascinated by how his master could be so proud of such a statement. Tsunade is scarier than all those women combined, and that's only when she's out of 𝐫𝐞. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 shuddered at the memory of Tsunade running out of 𝐫𝐞 while he was around. Naruto fell silent as he remembered why he was with 𝐤𝐢𝐳 in the first place. He frowned slightly. Although laughing at 𝐤𝐢𝐳's misfortune was fun, it wasn't why they had left the village with plans to be gone for over 2 years. 𝐵𝐵_Sage. Naruto's loud voice cut through the quiet, breaking 𝐤𝐢𝐳's attempt to soothe his headache. When are we going to start my training? It had been a week since they left the village, and Naruto was getting restless. He needed to get stronger quickly. So many people were counting on him, and he wasn't going to let them down. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 considered his options: either ignore him or come up with a lie to placate the impatient blonde. 𝐵𝐵_Sage. Naruto's impatience didn't give 𝐤𝐢𝐳 a chance to think. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 covered his ears in a futile attempt to block out Naruto's noise. Where's a mute button when you need one? He thought in exasperation. Once I finish gathering enough material for a few more chapters, we'll start your training. I promise. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 pleaded. He estimated it would take another week or two to gather the necessary material. He hoped this would calm Naruto down, though he didn't really think it would. Naruto groaned in frustration. That wasn't the answer he wanted. Come on, 𝐵𝐵_Sage. We both know I can't afford to waste time like this. Naruto's thoughts turned to Sasuke, and he clenched his teeth at the thought of his friend with Orochimaru. I have promises to keep. I can't just sit around and waste time. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 gave Naruto a curious look. Oh? What exactly are these promises you're talking about? Naruto's eyes hardened. I promised Sakura I'd bring Sasuke back. I need to get stronger to rescue him from Orochimaru. His voice was filled with determination, reflecting his commitment to his friends. Naruto, 𝐤𝐢𝐳 began. You need to focus on more immediate concerns. The Akatsuki will come after you, and I can't always be there to protect you. He knew Naruto wouldn't like hearing this, but needed to make the point. So, train me. If they're so strong, you need to make me stronger. Naruto avoided mentioning Sasuke, which irritated 𝐤𝐢𝐳. I will bring him back. No matter what, Naruto thought firmly. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 sighed, knowing he wouldn't easily convince Naruto to forget about his friend. He had been the same way at Naruto's age. Naruto, I get that you're in a hurry, but we have plenty of time. 2 years should be more than enough to turn you into a great shinobi. But why can't we use all the time available? Naruto asked hopefully. You could stop your research and help me get stronger. It shouldn't be that hard to write a book. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 went silent. Maybe Naruto had a point. With the Akatsuki threat looming, wouldn't it be better to focus intensely on training Naruto? Maybe I've been going about this all wrong, he thought. The sage sighed. The only problem is I need the money from this book to fund my spy network. If only I had a bit more time to finish it, I could focus entirely on training Naruto. He thought about what to do, then a small smirk appeared on his face. I just need a little more time, Naruto. He decided to use Naruto's competitive nature to buy some extra time for his book. Not that hard to write a book. Jiraiya repeated condescendingly. So, you think you can do a better job than me, brat? He asked with a mischievous grin. Naruto's eyes lit up with competitive fire. Jiraiya loved seeing this drive in him, reminiscent of when Naruto learned the Rasengan in under a week. Without hesitation, Naruto replied. No. Jiraiya hid his surprise behind a small frown. What? I know I can do a better job than you. Naruto finished smugly, cutting off Jiraiya's inward reaction. Jiraiya chuckled. That's more like it, he thought fondly. It was time to present his challenge, a challenge Naruto would never be able to resist. This will be completely outside your comfort zone, kid. Fine then. How about we make a deal, Naruto? Jiraiya said with a serious tone, unlike his earlier goofy demeanor. I'm listening, Naruto said, slightly unsettled by the serious Jiraiya. What's the deal? You said you wanted serious training, right? Jiraiya's phrasing was intentional, knowing it would catch Naruto's attention. Naruto's eyes sparkled with excitement. He had already forgotten his unease about the serious Jiraiya. Of course. I need to get stronger quickly to save everyone. Okay, Jiraiya began slowly. Naruto leaned in, eager to hear more. I promise to devote every second to training you as hard as possible if Naruto repeated eagerly. If you write your own novel and get it published through my publisher. Jiraiya finished with a wide grin. A complete and utter silence followed. Just as Jiraiya was about to break the quiet and check if his student was alright, Naruto spoke up about the challenge. What? Naruto exclaimed in shock. He hadn't expected this at all. You can't be serious. While Naruto wasn't known for his modesty, his time at the academy had shown him that he wasn't exactly skilled in academics, and writing was definitely one of his weak points. Oh, I'm very serious. Believe it, Jiraiya said mockingly. Just a minute ago, you were so confident you'd be the better writer. Why not put your money where your mouth is, kid? Naruto huffed at Jiraiya's mocking use of his catchphrase. It didn't sound nearly as cool coming from the old man. He was about to retort when Jiraiya cut him off. Oh, and before you agree, there's one more thing you need to know, Jiraiya continued, ignoring the daggers Naruto was glaring at him. What now? Naruto asked, annoyed. Was there more to this challenge? He was already being asked to do something he'd never considered. What else could there be? There's one more condition to this bet. Kondaityon. Naruto sounded out the word slowly, his face scrunching up as he tried to understand. What's that mean? He finally asked. Jiraiya sighed exasperatedly, pinching the bridge of his nose. He wondered if he should buy Naruto a dictionary. The kid had a long way to go before becoming a competent writer. Never mind, Naruto, Jiraiya said, brushing off the confusion. What I'm saying is, you know what you get if you win. But what happens if you lose? The smugness in his voice didn't go unnoticed by Naruto. Naruto scoffed, irritated by his master's phrasing. He was always dismissed before he even had a chance to prove himself. He pushed aside his doubts and resolved to take on the challenge. No matter what it is, I won't back down. He declared, his eyes blazing with renewed determination. There are too many people depending on me to quit now. Jiraiya was reminded of his younger self by Naruto's determination. I don't think I've been giving him enough credit, he thought fondly. Maybe he can handle more intense training than I originally thought. The kid's got guts. Jiraiya admired his pupil's never give up attitude. Jiraiya stared off into space for what felt like a few minutes, which started to unsettle Naruto. He waved his hand in front of his master's face. No response. Pervy sage? Naruto asked with concern. Jiraiya blinked a few times, snapping out of his daze, only to find Naruto standing on a chair, his face inches away from his. Naruto was way too close for comfort. You okay, perv? Jiraiya's eye twitched slightly as he felt Naruto's breath on his face. Surprise, it smells like ramen, he thought, slightly disgusted. Jiraiya stepped back to escape Naruto's ramen breath and cleared his throat. Sorry about that, he began. Naruto noticed Jiraiya's face had shifted back into his serious mode. Something told him he wouldn't like what came next. I know how much your friends mean to you, Naruto. But if you lose this bet, I, as your master, forbid you from trying to bring Sasuke back. Jiraiya was curious about how Naruto would react to this condition. The last time they talked about it, Naruto was determined to rescue Sasuke no matter what. Would he honor this new condition or ignore it as before? Jiraiya wasn't sure. Meanwhile, Naruto's mind was racing. Had he heard that correctly? How could Jiraiya ask him something like that? Sasuke was his best friend. He looked up at Jiraiya's face and saw that the older man was serious. What do I do? Naruto wondered desperately. If I want to get strong enough to save Sasuke, I might not even be allowed to try if I fail. Jiraiya felt a twinge of sympathy as he watched Naruto's inner struggle. No matter the outcome of this bet, Jiraiya was committed to training Naruto as intensely as possible. He just figured Naruto would give up soon, giving Jiraiya time to finish his book. Now, with this added condition, things had become more complicated. Maybe this will be good for him. Show me what you've got, Naruto. Jiraiya truly wanted the best for his student. This is probably the biggest decision of my life, Naruto finally said after a few moments of silence. Despite the difficult choice, he didn't hold it against Jiraiya. Given the sage's own history with Orochimaru, he understood more than anyone. So, what's it going to be, Naruto? Is it a deal? Jiraiya asked carefully, extending his fist. Their eyes met slowly, and Jiraiya's eyes widened slightly. Naruto's piercing gaze reminded him of his late student Minato, who thrived on challenges. It seemed he had passed that trait on to his own child. Naruto hadn't even spoken yet, but Jiraiya could already tell what his answer would be. It was written all over the boy's face. I'll do it. Naruto shouted with all the enthusiasm he could muster. He reached out and bumped fists with Jiraiya. Jiraiya smiled and chuckled at Naruto's steely confidence. Of course, you will, brat. It wouldn't be any fun if you quit before it even started. Jiraiya's excitement was clearly contagious. Just you wait. I'm going to win no matter what, Naruto declared as he watched his sensei. Jiraiya rummaged through his bags and pulled out a stack of paper and a pen. He handed them to Naruto with a cocky grin. If you're so confident, let's see if you've got what it takes to be a world-renowned author like me. Naruto took the materials swiftly and stuck his tongue out at Jiraiya. I'll show you. He looked down at the blank paper and blinked some more. A sudden realization hit him. He twitched anxiously, trying to hide his growing nervousness. Jiraiya could see the shift in Naruto's demeanor. What could be making him so anxious? Despite all his boasting and confidence, Naruto had no idea what his story would be about. Me and my big mouth. You know I don't actually need you here, right? Naruto shot a look of annoyance at his master. Jiraiya stayed silent, his face expressionless as if he hadn't heard a word. He lounged in a chair with his legs crossed, simply watching Naruto. The constant scrutiny was starting to creep Naruto out. Jiraiya's gaze was analytical, but it was clear he enjoyed making Naruto uncomfortable. The small smirk on his face was evidence of that. He shifted slightly in his chair but kept his eyes locked on his student. Naruto huffed and tried to focus on his paper, but the sight of the blank page reminded him that he hadn't written a single word in the 3 hours he'd been working. I'm doomed, he thought in despair. I'm just here in case you need advice, Jiraiya finally spoke, breaking his silence. I'm an experienced author, after all. It would be foolish not to ask me any questions, he added with a shrug. Naruto scoffed. Liar. You always leave me to figure things out on my own during training. He pointed an accusing finger at Jiraiya. Now that you have something to lose, you suddenly want to be supportive. I don't buy it. He crossed his arms and glared at his sensei. Though Jiraiya looked a bit guilty, he brushed off Naruto's accusations. The kid wasn't entirely wrong. Jiraiya would love to guide Naruto through every step, but that might be more harmful than helpful. Naruto needed to learn to figure things out on his own to truly grow stronger. Fine, I can tell when I'm not wanted, Jiraiya said, sticking his tongue out in a childish manner. He stood up to leave, but before he went, he placed something on the table beside him. Naruto noticed a large grin on the Sanin's face. See ya. Jiraiya waved as he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued, but he stayed seated. He didn't trust that grin. Upon closer inspection, he saw that the object was a book. It's just a book, he thought dismissively. Still, his curiosity grew. The book seemed like a prank, but it was clearly meant to provoke him. Despite knowing it was likely a joke, Naruto felt compelled to see what Jiraiya had left. He glanced back at his blank paper and sighed, regretting not asking for Jiraiya's advice. Maybe the book had something useful. It's worth a shot. Got nothing to lose, he said to himself. He stood up to examine the book more closely, his face scrunching up in annoyance. He immediately recognized it as one of Jiraiya's latest 𝐲𝐢𝐽 novels. That idiot. I knew it would be something useless, he muttered. Like I'd ever read one of his pervy books. He was about to ignore the book when something else caught his eye. He picked it up and noticed a note tucked inside. As he read it, his face turned bright red. I'll be gone for a few days, so here's a bit of inspiration for your book. Try not to make a mess while I'm gone, brat. Naruto dropped the book, his eye twitching. A flush of embarrassment spread across his face. Dirty old man, he hadn't expected to lose a bit of his innocence from reading that note. He took a few moments to recover from the images that the note had conjured up. He sat back down and continued to stare at the blank paper, hoping for sudden inspiration. But after a few moments, a feeling of hopelessness began to creep in. What if he simply wasn't cut out for writing a novel? How would he tell Sakura he couldn't keep his promise to bring Sasuke back because he couldn't write a book? I never thought this would be so hard. He dropped his head onto the desk with a thud. Naruto had accepted the bet impulsively, focused only on winning without thinking through the implications. I don't even have an idea for the book. What was I thinking? He glanced out the window and saw it was already dark. Is it night already? He asked with a yawn. Maybe I'll have better luck tomorrow. There's no point staying up if I'm not getting anywhere. He walked over to the couch and sank into the soft cushions with a sigh of relief. He kicked off his sandals and closed his eyes, thinking, I wonder where 𝐫𝐫𝐸 is. He fell asleep almost immediately. Early next morning. I don't think that's how it's supposed to be written, one high-pitched voice said loudly. What do you mean? The same voice asked in confusion. How else should I write it? The Naruto clones exchanged puzzled looks, their identical faces showing complete confusion. There were 10 Narutos in total, divided into 5 pairs. Each pair had one Naruto jotting down ideas, while the other spoke out anything that came to mind, hoping to spark inspiration. How am I supposed to know? The other Naruto retorted with slight annoyance. I'm you, I can't know something you don't. Then why do you think I'm writing it wrong? The other blonde shot back, equally annoyed. Because we're dumb, the clone replied casually with a shrug. The blunt truth made all the other Narutos stop and nod in agreement. After 2 hours of attempting to brainstorm with his clones, the real Naruto was fed up. He stood up, his frustration evident, but this moment also led to a realization. We are dumb, he said with a small smile. We've been rushing to finish this story, but we don't even know how to write. One by one, the clones came to understand he was right. So, what are you saying? Asked one of the clones, clearly confused. Naruto gave the clone an irritated look. He knew he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but talking to his clones highlighted just how dense he was. It means I need to learn to write properly before I can start this book. He wasn't thrilled with this conclusion, but he knew it was necessary. The other Narutos grimaced at the thought. That's going to take forever, one of them said, echoing the others' concerns. The longer it took to write the book, the less time Naruto would have to train for his battles against the Akatsuki. Yeah, Naruto said sadly. But don't worry. I'll study hard and have you guys back here to help me before the week's over. Believe it. All 9 clones smiled back with renewed confidence, ready to assist him. Naruto dismissed the clones with a puff of smoke, leaving just one. The remaining clone looked confused as he glanced at Naruto. Why am I still here? He asked, puzzled. Naruto grinned sheepishly. I need you to go into town and get me some books to help me learn how to write. He handed over his frog wallet, 𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐿. While you're doing that, I'll make some instant ramen for lunch. By the time you get back, I'll be ready. The clone gave Naruto an irritated look but agreed. Fine. Just don't expect me to rush back. It's been a while since I've had a chance to walk around and get some fresh air. He stuffed the wallet into his pocket and headed out the door. Naruto twitched slightly in annoyance. My clones are so stubborn. Talking back like that, who do they think they are? They're lucky I'm nice. Shaking off his irritation, Naruto focused on the task at hand. He needed to figure out how to read all the books his clone would bring back quickly while retaining all the knowledge. He had promised to finish in a week, but now he was starting to doubt his own confidence. I'm only one person, how can I manage all this in such a short time? He wondered desperately. Little did he know, the answer was out buying the books right now. The blonde clone strolled through Tenzaku town, enjoying the fresh air after being cooped up in the hotel room all day. He carefully held a plastic bag full of books, hoping they'd help Naruto write a novel. Hopefully, these are what he wanted, he thought, pulling out a book titled Writing for Dummies. This should be perfect. He chuckled to himself. He took in the lively marketplace around him, noting that despite the damage from the Sanin's fight a few months back, the town was still vibrant and full of life. The marketplace buzzed with customers buying food, antiques, and trinkets. Many tourists, however, were disappointed to find the famous castle was no longer standing. Jiraiya had insisted they start their trip here, much to Naruto's confusion. After constant pestering, Jiraiya had explained it was because of the town's attractive women, part of his research. They would stay for a few months until Jiraiya finished his book before moving on. The clone smiled, recalling these memories that weren't even his. He understood Naruto's feelings well and took them as his own. Despite Naruto's strong desire to train, he still enjoyed spending time with Jiraiya. The 𝐫𝐫𝐸 was like a father figure to him, with all his strengths and wisdom. The clone was pulled from his thoughts by a delicious smell. He looked around and saw numerous food stands, each offering mouthwatering treats. His stomach growled as he rubbed it. An evil grin spread across his face as he patted the frog wallet in his pocket. A clone's gotta eat too. After several food orders, the clone let out a satisfied burp. Man, that was delicious, he said happily, munching on grilled fish as he headed home. Despite being full, he was determined to finish the food he had bought. Once Naruto saw the state of his frog wallet, he might regret not being more frugal. He reached into the bag and pulled out the book he had been reading. I wonder how long it'll take him to read all these books, he thought, taking another bite of fish. As he read the book, he found it surprisingly interesting. This might actually be enjoyable, he mused. Finishing the fish, he tossed the stick over his shoulder and realized he had read the entire first chapter. It was a basic introduction to grammar and literary devices, but it was new to him. And this is just the beginning. The other books are even more advanced. It's about time you got back. What took you so long? Naruto's loud voice snapped the clone's attention back. He had been so absorbed in his thoughts that he didn't realize he was already at the hotel. I almost went looking for you. Thought you might have gotten lost. The clone scratched his head sheepishly. Sorry about that. I wanted to make sure I got enough books. He handed the wallet back to Naruto, conveniently omitting the fact that he'd indulged in a food binge. Naruto caught the wallet and noticed it felt lighter than usual, but brushed it off. So, these are the books? He asked, taking the plastic bag from his clone. Yep. Just like you asked, boss. The clone said proudly. Naruto smirked. Great job. I'll start reading these right away. He tried to sound confident, though he was still worried about how long it would take to get through all the books. The clone saluted and vanished in a puff of smoke. As Naruto was about to head inside, he stopped suddenly. A rush of unfamiliar memories hit him. He pulled out the frog wallet and, fearing the worst, opened it to find it half empty. Half empty, he said sadly. That idiot didn't even bring me any. Naruto blinked in confusion. Wait, how do I have his memories? He wondered aloud, though no one was around to answer. I wasn't with him. Focusing, he felt another presence in his mind. With a tight squeeze of his eyes, he accessed the memory and quickly grabbed the book from the bag. Skimming through the first chapter, he was astonished to find he recalled everything. But that he murmured, trying to piece it together. Somehow, he knew everything his clone experienced, including the book's content. Have I always had this ability with my clones? He wondered. His thoughts began to turn. I can use my clones to read all these books for me. I won't need a whole week to finish them. He felt a wave of relief and excitement. He dashed inside with a big smile. 𝐫𝐞𝐻 Bunshin no Jutsu. Inside his room, he summoned 11 clones, each with a determined look. You know what to do, he said, pointing to the stacked books. Grab one, read it, then swap with someone else. The more we read each book, the better chance I have of remembering it. This Naruto was different from the knucklehead he used to be. While he used to dislike reading, he now felt a new drive and determination. He wanted to prove himself and shove the finished book in Jiraiya's face. He remembered what his clone felt after finishing the first chapter of Writing for Dummies. I might actually enjoy this, he mumbled quietly, so his clones couldn't hear. They were already engrossed in their reading. I'll grab a book too, he decided. I think I'm finally done, the aspiring author said, closing one of the books he hoped would be the last. He sighed in relief. Naruto squinted as bright light hit his eyes. He glanced at the window and was surprised to see the sun up. Did we really study all night? He murmured to himself. He yawned and stretched, looking over at the clones sprawled across the hotel floor. He chuckled as he saw most of them drooling, with a few even cuddled together. They looked content despite their odd positions. He reflected on the past few days. If I'd known about this back in the academy, maybe my grades wouldn't have been so bad, he thought. Using his clones to speed up his learning had worked better than he ever imagined. Initially, he was worried it was just a fluke, but that fear vanished after seeing how much he learned in just a few hours. Over the last 3 days, he and his clones had studied tirelessly, though this was the longest stretch they'd read at once. Normally, he'd dispel the clones after a few hours to process the information. There's no point in waking them up, Naruto said, standing up and dispelling his jutsu. Smoke filled the room as the clones disappeared. He walked over to open a window, hoping to clear the smoke faster. Suddenly, he stumbled. Wah! His vision blurred, and he felt a sharp pain in his head, like his brain was swelling. The pressure behind his eyes was intense, making him feel like they might pop out. Unable to stay upright, he fell, desperately reaching for support, but lost consciousness before hitting the ground. Thump. Then two. A faint voice called his name. He could hear it, but couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from. He remembered starting to open the window before everything went black. The darkness persisted. Naruto. The voice was louder now, much closer. Jiraiya's apprentice began to stir. The sage saw his student's eyes moving behind closed lids and let out a sigh of relief. I'm glad I got here in time. He doesn't seem to have been out long. Jiraiya noticed the many books scattered around Naruto. He recognized their purpose. Seems he's taking this seriously after all, he thought. Despite his earlier doubts, he was impressed by Naruto's determination, though he still believed he'd win their bet. Pervy sage, came a groggy voice. Naruto's eyes were still glazed over, indicating he was still out of it. Jiraiya allowed himself a small smile, relieved his godchild was okay. Well, look who's finally awake. Do you know what time it is? No one said you could sleep in, brat. He teased, hiding his genuine concern. The teasing got to Naruto, who shot up to his feet with surprising speed. Who are you to talk, you old perv? He grumbled. You sleepin' all the time. Jiraiya brushed off the comment. Yeah, kid. But tell me, what happened? When I came back, you were out cold. Everything okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Naruto said, striking his trademark pose. I just got a bit dizzy, that's all. He tried to downplay it, not wanting to worry his teacher. Jiraiya's skeptical look told Naruto he wasn't convincing him. Alright, Naruto conceded with a sigh. The last thing I remember is studying with my clones all night. When I dispelled them, my vision went blurry, and I guess that's when I passed out. He hoped Jiraiya had an explanation, as he was stumped. Jiraiya's eyes widened slightly, though Naruto didn't notice. Reading with your clones. He pondered, though he already knew the cause. Looks like he figured out his clone's potential. Not bad. Star. How many clones did you use? 11, Naruto answered. Jiraiya began seriously, I don't think you should use your clones like that anymore. What? Why? Naruto protested. He had just found a great method and didn't want to give it up. It stressed your brain too much. That's why you passed out. Your mind can only handle so much at once before it overloads. Naruto wanted to argue, but knew Jiraiya was right. The benefits were high, but so were the risks. He grumbled quietly. However, Jiraiya said, drawing Naruto's attention, using no more than 5 clones for up to 3 hours at a time should be okay. He smiled. Naruto's eyes lit up with joy and he hugged his master in gratitude. Thank you. Yeah, Jiraiya said dismissively, though Naruto wouldn't let go. Get off me, Naruto. After several days of intense studying with his army of clones, Naruto felt ready to finally write something coherent. His understanding of spelling, grammar, literary devices, and plot development had reached levels he never thought possible. Although he still had a lot to learn before mastering writing, he was confident that he'd improve as he started putting his ideas on paper. Just like with being a ninja, having skills means little without practical experience. He was unsure if his quick grasp of writing was due to using clones to speed up the process, or if he had an innate talent for it. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, Naruto sighed in frustration as he stared at the ground. He leaned back, propping himself up with his arms to avoid falling over. While his newfound knowledge was impressive, he faced a major problem. What's the point of knowing how to write if I don't know what to write about? He thought, feeling dejected. He had improved his writing skills significantly, but knowing how to write didn't mean he had the creativity to apply it. He needed both technical skills and natural creativity to craft an engaging story. I still don't know what my story will be about. Immediately after finishing his study sessions with the clones, Naruto began brainstorming story ideas. He initially thought it would be helpful to have his clones assist in coming up with a topic. However, that plan quickly backfired when one of his clones insisted that the story should be solely about ramen. To Naruto's dismay, all the clones agreed with this ridiculous idea, leading to a heated argument that ended with one clone being dispelled after a smack. With the ramen idea out of the picture, Naruto had to come up with a story idea on his own. After several days of brainstorming, Naruto had come up empty. He yelled in frustration, what do people even read about? The sound echoed in the empty hotel room. He regretted never having read a book in his life. I need to think, he repeated to himself, rubbing his temples and hoping for inspiration. He glanced at the book Jiraiya had left him, shuddering. Not that kind of inspiration, he thought dryly. Just then, Jiraiya walked in. Naruto turned to see who it was and, upon realizing it was his master, sighed. What are you doing back already? Tired of staring at women all day? He asked mockingly. Jiraiya met Naruto's gaze with a fierce intensity, his eyes blazing with seriousness that Naruto had seen only a few times before. How could you even say that? Jiraiya replied deadpan, his tone so serious that Naruto had to suppress a laugh. But this wasn't a joking matter for Jiraiya. The female body is a marvel of beauty, I'll never tire of seeing it, he said, a slight blush on his cheeks. Naruto's eye twitched. Despite spending so much time with his teacher, he was still astonished by Jiraiya's perverted remarks. He allowed himself a faint smile at the sage's antics. He's never boring, he thought, chuckling to himself. Why are you back already? Naruto asked again, ignoring Jiraiya's reaction. Well, you see, Jiraiya began, then trailed off, scratching his head and chuckling awkwardly. I just wanted to see how my little protege is doing. Made any progress? His interest seemed less convincing to Naruto. You got caught by a bunch of women again, didn't you? Naruto asked, devoid of humor. Haha. Jiraiya turned to reveal a large bump on his head, the result of a woman's kick. How did you know? He asked weakly. When you said you came back for my benefit, Naruto said. Normally, you stay out much later, so I figured you had to come back because you pissed off some women and had to hide. Seems like someone's a detective, Jiraiya said sarcastically. He sat down a few feet away from Naruto, eyeing him curiously. But seriously, how are things going? He asked genuinely. Jiraiya might be distracted by women, but he truly cared about his student. Naruto was about to tell Jiraiya everything was fine and that his book would be done soon. But he hesitated. Normally, he would confidently reassure others, but he was out of his comfort zone this time. Maybe asking Jiraiya for advice wouldn't be so bad unless he pulled out that pervy book again. Actually, can I ask you something, pervy sage? Naruto asked, his tone lacking its usual sass. The shift in tone caught Jiraiya's attention. What is it, brat? He asked seriously. Why do you need to spy on women to write those books of yours? Naruto asked, genuinely curious. Despite his usual mockery, he wanted to understand why Jiraiya needed to peep if he was such a literary genius. Why not just use his imagination? Jiraiya's eyes gleamed with pride. To ensure my novels become masterpieces, of course. He said with unwavering confidence. Yeah, Naruto began, unable to resist a little jab. But why all the peeping? Shouldn't you be able to write without it if you're a genius? He teased Jiraiya lightly, enjoying the chance to poke fun at his master. Jiraiya, oblivious to the teasing, continued. Yes, but almost every successful author draws from their own experiences. It helps create a compelling and realistic story. Despite the perverted undertones of Jiraiya's books, his advice was insightful. Naruto's eyes lit up. Of course. It was so obvious. His life, his struggles, and his dream of becoming Hokage could make a compelling story. A hero with a powerful, uncontrollable ability, treated as a nuisance rather than a hero. This was his story. Jiraiya, unaware of the inspiration he had sparked, stood up. Well, I should get back to it. All this talk about peeping has me in the mood for more research. He was mixing peeping and research with ease. Naruto snapped out of his thoughts. Normally, he'd berate Jiraiya for his perversion, but today he was eager to get started on his story. Thanks for the advice. Don't get yourself killed, he said curtly, waving him off. I can't yet, Jiraiya replied with a thumbs up as he opened the door. I haven't seen enough of the gorgeous women from the Cloud Village. I hear they're beautiful. He closed the door behind him. Naruto shook his head at his master's antics. He may be goofy most of the time, but he really helped me. The boy felt a wave of relief and newfound determination. Time to get to work. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Suddenly, 7 identical Narutos filled the small hotel room, each with a determined expression. Well, except for one. Don't you think it's kind of self-centered to write a story about ourselves? I really think a story about Raymond would be better. There was a low thud and a poof. Anyone else have something to say? Naruto glared at his clones, a dangerous glint in his eyes. The remaining clones shook their heads vigorously. Good. Let's get to work. Okay. Using clones turned out to be incredibly helpful this time. Even though Naruto and his clones were essentially the same person, having them around was great for brainstorming. They weren't shy about criticizing ideas they didn't like, which was a bit strange. He didn't expect to be called an idiot by himself. It made him wonder if he was that much of a jerk to his friends too. Working with clones who were on the same wavelength allowed them to operate like a well-oiled machine. Naruto was amazed at how much they had accomplished in just a few hours. Some clones even helped outline the story, create the setting, and name the main character Menma, chosen for no better reason than his love for Raymond. The irony of that choice wasn't lost on him. As the sun's light streamed through the hotel window, Naruto put down his pen, realizing he had stayed up all night. Maybe we worked longer than I thought, he mused, rubbing his eyes. When his vision cleared, he surveyed the room. 4 clones were scattered on the floor, sleeping soundly. The 5th clone had gotten upset when Naruto dismissed his story idea. In retaliation, the clone had read part of Jiraiya's book, and when discovered, Naruto had dispelled him. However, the memories of the book had transferred back to Naruto, leaving him with disturbing images. Naruto shuddered, annoyed at the trouble the clones were causing. He yawned, feeling the exhaustion catch up with him. Looking at the work he'd done, he saw 3 solid chapters of a rough draft completed in just a day. Considering he aimed for a 10 to 12 chapter story, this was a great start. He felt immense pride in his work. This was the best writing he had ever done on his own, something he never thought possible when he was at the academy. Back then, writing wasn't on his radar, he only cared about becoming Hokage. It was amazing how much could change in a few months. For once, he wasn't dwelling on his past hardships or thinking about Sasuke. It was a refreshing change. He dispelled his clones and hid his work from Jiraiya, eager to see his mentor's reaction when he saw the finished product. Checking the clock, Naruto groaned 8:30 a.m. He had barely any time to sleep before Jiraiya would be back to drag him out of bed. Despite his busy schedule peeping on girls, Jiraiya made it a point to ensure Naruto never slept in. If Naruto wasn't up by 9 a.m., Jiraiya would dump ice-cold river water on him. The sage claimed it was to prepare him for a shinobi's life, but Naruto suspected he just enjoyed annoying him. Room temperature water or loud noises would do the job just fine. Naruto glanced at the clock again. After his 10-minute mental rant, he had about 20 minutes to get ready for Jiraiya's return. 20 minutes flew by, and as expected, at 8:59 AM, the door creaked open. Jiraiya's spiky white hair peeked in. The silence told him Naruto was definitely asleep. Perfect. He scanned the room and spotted a tuft of blonde hair sticking out over the back of the couch. This is too easy, he thought. Jiraiya moved stealthily into the room, using his renowned ninja skills. As he approached Naruto, he pulled out a storage scroll with the kanji for water and unraveled it. This is going to be good, he mused. Suddenly, instead of finding Naruto, he saw a look-alike scarecrow under a blanket on the couch. Huh? He said, confused. What is this? Bang. Jiraiya immediately regretted asking. Naruto appeared out of nowhere and smacked him on the head with a comically large frying pan. Naruto laughed hysterically as Jiraiya crumpled to the ground, clutching his head. A large bump was already forming. Ha! That's what you get for trying to mess with me, pervy sage. Naruto declared triumphantly. Jiraiya, still recovering, could only mumble incoherently. As Naruto laughed, his stomach rumbled. All this fun has made me hungry. I hope we have some ramen, he said, heading to the kitchen, eager for his favorite food. We don't, Jiraiya groaned, still nursing his bump. Why does everyone always hit me in the same spot? He wondered. Naruto frowned. Huh. Why not? He was disappointed. Because you need to eat more than just ramen. It's not good for you, Jiraiya replied. Naruto pouted. Well, what if I don't want to? Too bad, Jiraiya said, enjoying the look of dismay on Naruto's face. If you want to grow taller and be stronger, you need a balanced diet. It might seem harsh now, but you'll thank me later. Naruto shivered at the word nutritious. He didn't want to think about giving up ramen. Jiraiya facepalmed. Nutritious isn't a bad word, he said, noticing Naruto's discomfort. I'm not saying you can never have ramen again, just that you need to eat other foods to improve. Okay, Naruto said weakly, wanting to change the subject. The talk about less ramen and more nutritious food was depressing him. Jiraiya sighed, realizing it was best not to push the issue. So he began innocently, how's the writing going? Not great, Naruto said vaguely, shrugging. You were right. Writing is harder than I thought. Although he tried to sound defeated, he was actually pleased with his progress. He wanted to keep his achievements hidden and deflate Jiraiya's expectations. Jiraiya smirked, unaware of Naruto's true feelings. One day, you'll see that I'm always right, he said proudly. Naruto rolled his eyes. Yeah, right. His sarcasm was clear. Shut up, brat. A few weeks later. The cave was dark, cold, and damp, with only the occasional drip of water breaking the silence. Stalactites hung from the ceiling, their tips glistening as water trickled down. In the middle of the cave stood a lone figure, but something was off about him. The stalactite hung above him, with a droplet of water forming at its tip, struggling against gravity. Just as the droplet was about to fall, it seemed to pass right through the figure. This figure didn't seem solid. He looked more like a hologram, with spiky hair and his face adorned with unusual black metal piercings. Even though he wasn't physically present, he radiated a commanding presence that demanded respect. The power of his presence was most evident in his eyes. Despite the cave's darkness, his purple eyes shone as brightly as the sun, with deep black circles around his pupils forming a rippling pattern. He had been standing there silently for several minutes without moving or making a sound. You're late, he finally said, though he was still alone. Moments later, another figure emerged from the ground. This one was solid and looked like a bizarre creature, half black and half white, with something resembling a Venus flytrap around his body. He was not human. Sorry, the creature said in a surprisingly light, almost playful voice that contrasted sharply with his appearance. I didn't want to leave early and miss anything important. His demeanor was playful and goofy, in stark contrast to the serious and intense figure he was addressing. I suppose you have a point, the hologram figure replied after a brief pause. Let's be quick. What is your report, Zetsu? His tone made it clear that he was in charge. Well, Zetsu began hesitantly, will you hurry up and spit it out? An abrupt gruff voice interrupted, sounding irritated. We don't have all day. 3 voices, yet only 2 figures stood in the cave. The hologram figure didn't flinch. I agree with Black Zetsu. What's your report? He demanded, focusing intently on the left side of Zetsu's face. They seem to be stationary for now and aren't likely to move soon, Zetsu said, his playful tone replaced by seriousness as he reported his findings. Why do you think that? The leader asked. None of their stuff is packed up. If they were planning to leave soon, they'd be preparing their things for travel, Zetsu replied simply. Interesting, the ethereal figure said after a pause. I would have expected them to be constantly on the move to avoid detection. He closed his eyes momentarily, deep in thought. Why don't we move in now? Zetsu suggested, causing the leader's eyes to snap open. He looked at Zetsu with interest, waiting for him to continue. He's alone most of the day and vulnerable. It would be easy. White Zetsu spoke with enthusiasm. Is there no sign of him? The leader asked cautiously. No. They're separated for several hours a day, Zetsu replied. Don't be a fool, the leader said harshly. Don't underestimate him. It could be your undoing. White Zetsu flinched but remained silent, knowing to heed his leader's warnings. I don't think now is the right time to act, the pierced man said, looking at a puddle of water on the cave floor. The water rippled slightly, almost imperceptibly to an ordinary observer, but his eyes were far from ordinary. He turned his gaze back to his subordinate. Even if we capture the Nine Tails, we can't seal him immediately. And if we don't, the Leaf Village might try to rescue him before we can do anything else. Zetsu nodded, understanding the logic. More importantly, as long as he's protected by him, the Nine Tails is untouchable. It was now clear that the leader was a high-ranking member, or possibly the leader, of the S-class criminal organization Akatsuki, with Naruto Uzumaki as their target. He's really that strong, Pain? Zetsu started to ask something else, but was silenced by the leader's intense gaze. It wasn't his turn to speak. Yes, Pain, the Akatsuki leader, confirmed. However, he continued slowly, considering his options. If the opportunity arises, we might be able to act earlier. That was all he said on the matter. He had more thinking to do. Continue your surveillance and update me on any significant developments. He turned away, signaling that the meeting was over. Understood, both Zetsu said in unison. They slowly sank back into the ground until they disappeared completely. The hologram of Pain remained in the cave, his eyes shut as he reflected on his past. For a brief moment, a flicker of emotion crossed his face, but he dismissed it. He felt nothing. Jiraiya-sensei, huh? How nostalgic. With that, the hologram vanished, leaving the cave empty. And the winner is? Hey Naruto. I'm heading out to do some research. Want to join me? Jiraiya heard a loud poof, and soon Naruto walked into the room, rubbing his cheek with a scowl. Why would I want to go perving with you, pervy sage? He snapped. Jiraiya noticed a bruise forming on Naruto's right cheek and frowned. What happened to you? He asked, puzzled. Naruto grumbled about a clone calling him ugly, which led to a brawl among his clones. It doesn't make any sense. His frustration was slightly amusing to Jiraiya. He looks exactly like me. Jiraiya sighed. As much as I'd like to discuss your problems, there are beautiful women out there I need to observe. He paused, realizing how that sounded. That didn't come out right. Sounds right to me, because that's all you do, Naruto quipped. Nah, Jiraiya retorted with a childish tone. I take notes. Naruto had no comeback. He just put his face in his hands, wondering if being trained by Orochimaru might have been better. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad, he mused. You know, kid, Jiraiya began, pulling Naruto from his troubling thoughts. You might want to give up on this bet of ours soon. The comment made Naruto scowl. Well, it's fun to watch you lose, we need to start your training soon. It's been weeks, and I haven't seen any progress on your book. Honestly, I'm a bit disappointed. Naruto opened his mouth to protest, but Jiraiya cut him off. I know you want to find your friend, but a deal's a deal. I'll still train you, just not about Sasuke. Got it? His tone was firm but not harsh. He had to be careful with his words, Naruto's emotions often influenced his actions. Naruto waited to make sure Jiraiya was done. To Jiraiya's surprise, Naruto was calm and composed, almost unrecognizable. There are a few things I want to ask, Naruto said evenly. Jiraiya nodded. First, what's the difference between your original training plan and the one we would have done if I won the bet? Naruto's calm demeanor was unexpected. Jiraiya thought something felt off but dismissed it. This bet was to test your mental strength. If you had stepped out of your comfort zone and written a book, it would have shown me you could handle tough training, he explained, watching Naruto's unchanging expression. Unfortunately, I'm not sure you're ready for the intense training. I don't want to risk causing you lasting harm. But don't worry, our training will still be the toughest you've ever faced. We'll just be more cautious. Okay. Jiraiya felt guilty for stacking the odds against Naruto, but needed to test his determination. He couldn't risk damaging his godson permanently. He shuddered at the thought of facing Kushina in the afterlife. Naruto and his clones had been reading a dictionary over the past few weeks, so he understood most of what Jiraiya said. He nodded, signaling that he understood. There's one more thing, Naruto said, continuing as if he hadn't heard Jiraiya. Jiraiya's eyes narrowed, sensing something strange. Normally, Naruto would have interrupted several times. What is it? He asked, glancing around to make sure there wasn't another frying pan wielding Naruto nearby. How can you say I'm out of time? You're still not done with your research. You were supposed to be finished with your peeping a week ago, Naruto said. Jiraiya blushed, caught off guard by the criticism. "Well, I've finished most of it," he said, trying to defend himself. "We'll start training tomorrow. I'll just have to do some research in between." Naruto huffed, feeling it was just more of the same, Jiraiya showing him something once and then disappearing to perv around town. With the Akatsuki threatening soon, he wasn't interested in repeating that cycle. You can take your half-hearted training and intermittent perv sessions and stick them where the sun doesn't shine. He crossed his arms defiantly. "I don't need you to train me and do your research at the same time." Jiraiya noticed the pride in Naruto's voice. If he wasn't interested before, he was now. "Oh? And why's that?" he asked, genuinely intrigued. Naruto was about to explain but was interrupted by a knock at the door. "That's odd," Jiraiya said to himself. Who could it be? He opened the door to a face he didn't expect. "What are you doing here?" he asked, dumbfounded. 1 week earlier. The group of Naruto clones stared at a large stack of papers. "Is that it?" one asked. "Are we done?" another said hopefully. There was a brief silence as the clones looked at each other for confirmation. "No." One Naruto suddenly stood up, angry. "Have you read the ending? It's terrible." He held up a page, pointing at the text with frustration. The original Naruto snatched the page from him, sneering. "What's wrong with it?" he demanded. "It's unrealistic," another clone shouted. The rest of the clones grumbled in agreement, much to Naruto's dismay. His eye twitched. It was bad enough dealing with criticism from others, but from his own clones. What's unrealistic about it? He was torn between anger and hurt. Did his clones' opinions reflect his own doubts? He glanced at them, thinking, some of my clones have thoughts I don't usually have. How is that possible? They're me. He was intrigued but would have to think about it later. The guy never gets the girl in real life, a clone said, unaware of Naruto's thoughts. It's so cliché. The clones nodded in agreement. They all sighed, thinking about Sakura, their crush. Naruto knew from experience that heroism doesn't always win love. "Yeah, you're right," they sighed in unison. "We need a new ending. Any ideas?" Their enthusiasm was gone. Naruto didn't like thinking about his chances with Sakura. One clone tapped him on the shoulder, interrupting his thoughts. "What about this?" the clone asked, handing Naruto a few sheets of paper. "I wrote this while you were working on your love story. Let me know what you think." Naruto hesitated but took the pages. This clone seemed to be the one who had suggested a ramen-themed plot. "Wait, what am I thinking? We're all the same," he scolded himself. He read through the pages carefully, his expectations high. As he read, he recalled a lesson from one of the books he'd studied. A well-crafted ending is crucial to conveying an author's message. He kept that in mind while reading. What message did he want to convey? He wasn't sure. With each page, his excitement grew. This was exactly what he wanted. "This is it," he whispered, so quietly that a clone asked him to repeat himself. He finished reading, then exclaimed, "This is it." His enthusiasm was evident and he looked at his clones with pride. "I love it." A tear formed in his eye. The clone who wrote the ending puffed up with pride. "We did it, boys." They cheered. "I'd love to celebrate, but I have work to do before the old perv gets home." The clones nodded and disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto dashed across the room, rifling through Jiraiya's belongings. "Where is it?" he muttered, searching for the publisher's name and address. His eyes fell on the book Jiraiya had left behind. It had remained untouched for over a week and the sight of it made Naruto uncomfortable. Anything but that, he thought, though he knew he had no choice. After a few more minutes of searching, he reluctantly reached for the book. He took a deep breath and opened it, scanning the first pages. His face reddened as he accidentally read part of the first chapter. Who reads this stuff? He sighed, thinking of his other mentor, Kakashi. Naruto wondered if he was lucky or cursed to have such mentors. There it is. He finally found the information he needed. Land of Fire Publishing Company. He copied down the address, feeling relieved. After noting everything, he put the book back where it belonged in the trash. Naruto chuckled to himself. A trashy novel, indeed. If his clones had heard that, he'd have lost some cool points. Present day. Naruto's curiosity was piqued by his master's reaction as he looked toward the doorway. There, he saw a man in some of the strangest clothing he'd ever encountered, and that was coming from someone who wore bright orange regularly. The man wore a grayish-green uniform and a matching hat, along with dark goggles and a side bag. From what Naruto could see, the bag held a few small packages, but mostly looked like it contained letters. That's the weirdest mailman I've ever seen, Naruto thought to himself. 59603, at your service. The man announced cheerfully. Naruto noticed the numbers stitched in red right below his hat's brim. I have a package for Naruto Uzumaki. The mail carrier appeared completely unfazed by the confusion of the white-haired man. Who's this guy? Naruto asked with suspicion. The man spoke in a strange, almost robotic way but with enthusiastic energy, which unsettled the young ninja. "This is 59603. He says he has a package for you," Jiraiya said, hoping his student could shed some light on the situation. Initially, he had been worried it was Anbu Black Ops members recruiting him, but now he was just out of the loop. 59603. Naruto repeated, taking the mail from the odd man. "That's not a name, just numbers." "Correct," the man replied. "I'm a courier ninja. We use numbers as identification markers to organize our work." Naruto scrutinized the man. "So, you're like a postman or something?" "Not exactly. Regular postmen don't risk their lives every day," the courier ninja said with pride, despite his robotic tone. "Oh, so you're like an awesome postman." Jiraiya sighed. Sometimes Naruto's cluelessness was astounding. "Just let the guy finish his delivery, Naruto," he said. He thanked the courier and shut the door as the man left for his next delivery. So Jiraiya leaned over Naruto's shoulder. "What's in the package?" He was puzzled about why anyone would send Naruto anything and how they'd even know he was here. Naruto gave a small smile. He was so intrigued by the bizarre mailman that he hadn't even thought about what the mail might be. As he began to piece it together, he realized it could be the result of their bet. This was about to get interesting. "Nothing you'd be interested in, 𝐫𝐸𝐳, Naruto said vaguely, shifting his shoulder to block Jiraiya's view of the package. The nosy sage was trying to spoil the surprise, and Naruto wasn't having it. Jiraiya's curiosity grew stronger. Naruto opened the large manila envelope and quickly skimmed the contents. It was a letter from Jiraiya's publishing company. The blonde's grin widened as he read more. "Naruto." Jiraiya's frustration was clear. "Let me see." He bounced with impatience. Being out of the loop was infuriating for someone who prided himself on being in control. "Read and weep, 𝐫𝐸𝐳, Naruto taunted, holding out the letter. Jiraiya grabbed it eagerly and started reading. Recognizing the publisher's header, he realized with growing dread that Naruto had won the bet. The kid who could barely write his own name was about to become a published author. Jiraiya stammered, rubbing his eyes and continuing to read, but the words remained the same. He had lost the bet. "By what, 𝐫𝐸𝐳?" Naruto asked with a huge grin. "What were you about to say?" While it was fun to rub his victory in his sensei's face, Naruto felt something deeper. This was more than just winning, it was about creating something he was proud of. Mastering the Rasengan was great, but he hadn't invented it. Creating Menma and having it recognized by a major publisher was a huge achievement. Jiraiya, despite his bitterness, felt immense pride for Naruto. "I have to admit, Naruto, you exceeded my expectations. I asked a lot from you, and you proved me wrong. I'm proud of you," he said sincerely. Naruto was taken aback. Growing up without much parental support, he always craved adult approval. Jiraiya's words, though simple, meant a lot to him. For a moment, he felt what it was like to have a father figure. "Thanks," he managed to say. Jiraiya scratched his head and sighed. "Like I said before, a deal is a deal. Though it looks like I'm on the losing end." He chuckled. "Since it's getting late, we'll start training in the morning. Make sure you're ready." "Wait a minute," Naruto said. "You're not still going out to do research, are you?" he asked with irritation. "No," Jiraiya replied simply. "I promised that if I lost, I wouldn't make you stop jazzing Sasuke. I'll honor my word. From now on, training will be our sole focus." Naruto could tell he was sincere. "Then where are you going?" Naruto asked, puzzled. Jiraiya usually went out to do research, and it seemed like that was all he did. "I need to write up the training plan for you. I didn't prepare anything because I thought I'd win. Looks like I won't be getting much sleep tonight." "Couldn't you write it here?" Naruto asked. "Trust me, you don't want me here keeping you up," Jiraiya said with a dangerous glint in his eye. "And I don't want you snooping and spoiling my surprises." Naruto gulped. "You'll need every bit of sleep you can get. Tomorrow's training is going to be intense." Jiraiya, despite his pride in Naruto, was competitive and planned to channel his frustration into rigorous training. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Naruto stuttered, backing away slightly. Jiraiya gave a sadistic grin in response. Without another word, Jiraiya left the hotel room, his smile now a menacing grin. "This is gonna be fun," he thought. "Well, fun for me," he chuckled, his laughter echoing in the hotel hallway. Now alone, Naruto had much to think about. Most importantly, he was finally going to get the training he deserved. Despite Jiraiya's intimidating talk, Naruto felt a surge of excitement. Just as he had risen to previous challenges, he was ready for this one. Then there was Sasuke. Winning the bet meant he could keep his promise to Sakura and continue his quest to save his friend. "I'll save you, Sasuke. Don't worry," he thought with determination. The clock read 6 p.m. and his stomach growled. "Guess I should eat dinner and get ready for bed," he said to himself. With how Jiraiya was talking, he figured he'd be waking up much earlier than usual. Extra sleep would be crucial. Naruto checked the cabinets but found no ramen. How could Jiraiya expect him to train without his favorite dinner? The situation seemed dire. He then noticed a bento box in the fridge with a note on it. Curiously, he picked it up and read. I know you're probably upset about losing the bet. But it's for the best, I promise. Our training starts tomorrow, and you need something more nutritious than ramen if you want to get stronger. Believe it or not, I made this food myself. And no, it won't kill you. Enjoy. Jiraiya. Naruto smirked, realizing Jiraiya must have left this note before he headed out. He wondered how his master had managed to make food when he hadn't left the hotel in days. Inside the bento box was steak, peppers, and other vegetables over rice. Despite his fears about nutritious food, the meal looked edible. He sat at the table, picked up the chopsticks, and tasted the steak. This is actually really good, he said, surprised. The meat was tender and seasoned perfectly, and the vegetables complemented the dish well. No way he cooked this himself, he said as he devoured the meal. Tomorrow would be tough, but hopefully, this food would give him the strength he needed. Naruto finished his meal and slammed the box back onto the table, his eyes filled with determination. I'm ready. I hope you guys liked the story. If you did, click on any of the videos which are popping on the screen right now. I promise you'll love them too. If you like my videos you can like and subscribe too. I'll see you on another amazing What If video guys. Love you all, peace.